What did you make for food?
Um, like a steak and rice bowl.
Wowie! Alright, let me close my door. And this dog better not bark.
She will.
God, I'm so excited for Severance. Sorry.
Don't make me hit you.
I got instant karma. My instant karma, holy shit. Just wanted to take a sip of my drink.
We all lost something once.
I lost something once. Alright. What even happened last time? Oh, yes. Do you remember what happened last time?
No.
He turned into a little baby. And they got him clothes.
Right.
So, oh my god, that went in my lung. So they just, and then they were leaving the store, and the robot is in charge of that. They were leaving the store, and Shilian was like gonna pay, and then Hua Chung just slammed a bunch of gold on the counter and was like, "Keep the change," as this tiny little guy. Jesus.
Do you need a second?
It like went in one of my, what are those called? Not your trachea, not your areola, the sacs in your lung.
I don't know. I just call them pipes.
All right, it went in my pipe. And then so that chapter ends with, he tugged at the corner of Shilian's sleeve and strolled outside the store with his hands clasped behind him. Shilian smiled and started to walk after him, but he was surprised when Hua Chang backtracked right into his arms as he came back inside. Shilian held him steady by the shoulders. "What's wrong?" He looked up and saw a familiar figure in the flowing crowd outside, and his heart lurched as well. Coincidentally, the store owner asked, "Would you two like to purchase anything else?" Shilian raised his hand. "Yes, please. Bring me that robe." So now we're at Chapter 75. Out in the wilds, rioting at the Shady Inn. The store owner was taken aback. "Huh? That one? Dao Zhang, are you sure that's the one you want?" "Yes, that one," Shilian definitively confirmed. With that, he simply rushed up and grabbed the robe himself. He then picked up Hua Chang, dashed to the back of the store, and slipped behind a set of curtains. This clothing store was a daring one, and innovative at that. There was a small stall inside for fitting, so those who came to purchase clothes could try them on right there. The crowd was bewildered at the ruckus. Moments later, a magnificently dressed cultivator walked past the clothing store, grumbling as he rubbed at his forehead. Behind him followed a mob of strange and fierce-looking monks and cultivators. When he saw the large crowd gathered at the clothing store, he barked displeased. "What are you looking at?" "Sigh, forget it. Let's hurry. I need to go to the toilet again." "Wait, heaven's eyes, Shang. There are plenty of people here. Why not ask if they saw them?" "My lady benefactors, have you seen a white-clad cultivator pass by, accompanied by a small child covered in bandages?" The crowd of customers said nothing, but there were some who unconsciously glanced at the back of the store. The chasing mob grew cautious, and they made silent gestures at each other, indicating that they should go inside to investigate. Heaven's Eye strode inside and slowly approached the curtains, holding his breath. A moment later he yanked them open, which prompted a shriek from inside. Behind the curtains there sat a woman. Her long, raven black hair was twisted up in a loose bun, and her slender white neck was decorated by a black choker and a thin silver chain. She had pulled down a small part of her shirt, which revealed her snow-white shoulder and nearly half of her back. It looked as if the robe was about to fall, and the sight made one's face burn and heart race. After Heaven's Eye yanked back the curtains, the woman trembled and covered her face with her sleeves while whimpering softly, as if she was shocked and terrified by a sudden, brutish act. Heaven's Eye instantly dropped the curtains. I'm sorry! The band of monks and cultivators trailing behind Heaven's Eye screamed as well. What a sin! What a sin! They all covered their eyes. Using this chance, the woman whirled around. Who else could it be but Shilian? Hua Cheng was sitting in his arms and had been blocked from view by Shilian's body. While Shilian was a man and his shoulders were wider than the average woman's, he'd achieved the perfect effect by only pulling down half of his clothing to expose the best angle. With one hand full of Hua Cheng, Shilian lifted his skirt with the other and dashed like the wind past those screaming monks and cultivators once they'd covered their eyes. The store owner and lady customers were dumbfounded. Seeing him flee, the store owner initially wanted to stop him, but as he opened his mouth, he spotted that gold foil. It more than paid for two sets of clothing, and so he shut his mouth, shrugged, and stopped caring. Bro was trying on a dress, and they were like, "Are you sure that's not the one you want?" He was like, "Yes." Carrying Hua Cheng in his arms, Shilian dashed madly away, leaving nothing dust behind him. Passerbys on the street stared with unbelieving eyes, but they only saw the blurred afterimage of a woman holding a child racing as lithe and ferocious as a jaguar. The clouds of suffocating dust stirred up in his wake left the crowds choking and coughing. A small food stall on the side of the road got covered in the stuff, and the owner started cussing. "What's wrong with you?" Shilian spared the time to turn his head and shout, "Everything's wrong! I'm sorry! I'm sorry!" He heard wild hollering from behind him. "Stop right there!" When he looked back, he saw the mob charging out of the clothing store. I have to wonder what's going through the heads of the people who yell "stop right there." It's obvious the one they're yelling at won't stop. They'll just hold their breath and run faster, Shilian thought, and he put those very thoughts into action, dashing away all the quicker. With such a large, roaring mob running down the street, more dust flew and choked the air. The food stall owner couldn't even curse anymore, and he flipped his own walk in anger. Why the fuck do I even bother? After keeping up the chase for 4 hours, the ceaselessly hollering monks and cultivators finally ran out of breath and their steps slowed. Shilian was experienced in the art of escape, and he quietly persevered to the very end. Once they had completely lost their pursuers, Shilian set Hua Cheng down and stood on the side of the road gasping for breath. Hua Cheng held his shoulders and said glumly, "Don't breathe too harshly. Careful not to hurt yourself." Shilian looked up and saw Hua Cheng's tiny frown, but since his companion was still wearing the face of a child, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. He laughed too abruptly. A sharp pain shot through his ribs, and he clutched his chest to seek relief. Seeing Hua Cheng's dismayed expression, he waved dismissively. "It's nothing. Is that an inn over there?" Sure enough, there was an inn not far ahead, its warm yellow glow peeping through the steadfast blues of the evening. It almost seemed like it was beckoning travelers. Shilian straightened up. "Let's go in and rest." "All right," Hua Cheng replied. Shilian grasped Hua Cheng's hand, and the two strolled towards the small building. When they arrived at the entrance, Shilian realized that this inn had two levels. It was much more lavish than it appeared from afar. The doors were closed, and Shilian raised his hand to give a light knock. "Anyone there? We'd like to stay the night." Soon enough, someone came from the inside. "Coming! Coming!" A moment later, the door opened. Several attendants came forward to greet them, their faces full of smiles. "Good sir—" They initially meant to say "good sir," but the person before them was wearing women's robes. They amended their statement. "Miss—" Before the word left their mouths, Shilian fully emerged from the darkness with Hua Cheng in hand. This wasn't an unmarried lady, if there was a child, so they amended themselves again. Madam was still half on their lips when Shilian's face became illuminated by the light within the inn. This guest was dressed in women's robes, but if they had to be honest, while his face was gentle in appearance, it was a man's face, no matter how they looked. The attendants fell mute at once, and it was a good moment before they simply went back to their original greeting. Good sir, please come inside. Julian smiled as he nodded. He'd worn pretty much every type of clothing at some point, and he felt not a drop of mental or physical discomfort. With Hua Chung in hand, he crossed the extremely low threshold and sat down at a table in the corner of the lobby. Other than the attendants, there was no one else at the inn. The moment they entered, the attendants had immediately closed the door and gathered around their table, smiles plastered on their faces, smiles that were now making Julian rather uncomfortable. He took the menu card. It's not easy to find an inn like this in the middle of nowhere. Amazing. Isn't that the truth? It's not easy to attract customers like you in the middle of nowhere either, the attendants responded. For some reason, while they were all smiling, those smiles looked painted on, quite fake indeed. Julian didn't let his thoughts show. He looked over the menu and ordered a few dishes, and the attendants merrily left to convey those orders to the kitchen. Hua Chung toyed with his chopsticks. Guga. We're at a shady establishment run by ghosts. Julian acknowledged. Out here in the middle of nowhere, even finding a small, one-level inn with a few attendants would have been quite amazing. Why would there be such a lavish establishment with so many attendants if there wasn't something suspicious afoot? Of course, this wasn't strong evidence on its own. The real indicator was the fact that Julian had smelled the thick, fresh stench of blood from the moment he entered the inn. Ordinary folks probably wouldn't notice the smell, but to someone with his sharp senses and considerable experience, it was so heavy it couldn't be ignored. There are more people on the second floor. I hear their footsteps, Julian said. I wonder if they're also travelers staying the night. If they were, then they must be rescued. The two sat across from each other and brought their faces close, talking in whispers for a long while. The attendants finally brought over their dishes. Coming! Julian... Sorry. Julian was about to speak, but he sensed a slight movement from the outside and rose to his feet. We're going to go rest in our rooms. Can I trouble you to bring our food upstairs? No problem, no problem. Julian took Hua Chung's hand and lifted his skirt with his other hand, with practiced ease as they went upstairs. He looked back. Oh, by the way, if anyone asks, please tell them you've never seen us. No problem, no problem. Julian hurried up the stairs. It wasn't long before they heard someone banging brashly on the front doors, and a gruff voice called out, Open up! The attendants opened the door with smiles on their faces. The crowd that poured in was the relentless mob of monks and cultivators led by Heaven's Eye. By then, Julian and Hua Chung had already entered their room on the second floor. As they shut the doors behind them, they could hear the people who had just entered yelling, Toilet! 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 and running for the outhouse, while others demanded, Boss, you got water? The attendants were overjoyed at the sight of so many people coming in at the same time. We do. Please wait. It's coming. Ha! I'm so bloated, Heaven's Eye complained. Unbelievable. Those whatchamacallits, those incorruptible chastity pellets really are a tenacious poison. I've only gotten through 20-something cups. How long will it take before I reach 81? Julian was speechless. He hadn't imagined that those monks and cultivators would be so gullible. He'd told them to drink 81 cups of water, and so they really planned on drinking exactly 81 cups of water. Amitabha Buddha, I have already imbibed 25 cups of water, and I must say it's very effective as an antidote, one of the monks declared. I am feeling much better already. Hearing this, Julian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He fumbled around the room to see if there were any cracks he could peek through until he heard Hua Chung calling to him. The boy was half crouched on the floor, along the wall. Guga, look over here. Julian crouched as well and looked where he was pointing on the floor, but he didn't see anything unusual. What am I looking at? Hua Chung suddenly poked the floor, and a small hole instantly appeared. A thin ray of light shone through. Here, now we can see. Julian leaned down and peeked through the hole. The mob was gathered at a long table in the middle of the lobby, and Heaven's Eye slapped its wooden surface. We were too careless this time. Next time we will see that evil cultivator. Next time we see that evil cultivator, we won't give him any chance to take advantage of us. We must take down Hua Changzi and eradicate evil in the name of heaven. Sanlang, just how did you offend them? Julian whispered. Before Hua Chung could answer, someone else had already asked in Julian's place. That's right, I never asked. But what brings all of you here to catch that ghost king? What's the story? With that, their condemnation meeting began. Just talking about it brings fury to my heart. 20 years ago, there was a pig spirit who went crazy and uprooted the village master's household. The building collapsed and the whole family was killed, and the pig fled to Ghost City. I'd only just entered the trade at the time. I chased after the creature, but I was beaten to a pulp by a bunch of ghosts. What humiliation! He also sent one of his lackeys to tell me that if you eat a whole family of pigs, it's only fair a pig to slaughter your whole family in revenge. It's your lucky day if the pig doesn't seek revenge. If it does, then you deserved it. Now tell me, what is that rotten logic? What a coincidence. Our sect experienced something similar, but it was in regards to a rooster spirit. Our story's simple. The heavenly official we worshipped in our sect had his name on his hit list, so no matter how many temples we built, he'd burn them down. What an outrage. Absolutely unreasonable. Hear, hear. You all know of my Shishang, right? He was talented and had an infinite future. He only had one tiny vice. He loved to dally with women. Decades ago, a prostitute ghost seduced my Shishang and sucked him dry, turning him into human jerky. That that Ghost King dared shelter her. The criticism was flaming down below, but above it, Hua Chang looked bored out of his mind, not even bothering to give a taunting smirk. I think I've heard of your Shishang before, Heaven's Eye said. Wasn't he the guy who would force himself on married women under the pretense of conducting rituals and ceremonies? The one who got locked up for 3 months? The attendants brought their food over just then, and the crowd's attention was diverted. Food's here, come, let's say no more, Heaven's Eye Shang, let's eat. Shulian straightened up and squinted at the dishes the inn attendants brought over. Don't bother looking. They'll keel over the moment they eat that stuff, Hua Chang said. This is going to be troublesome, Shulian murmured. While the mob of monks and cultivators was relentless and extremely annoying, Shulian couldn't just let them croak in this strange, shady establishment. But it would also be rather awkward for them to raise the alarm. Suddenly, Heaven's Eye spoke up. Hold it! He stared at the dishes and blocked the others from digging in, his eyes sharp and flashing. He does have some skill, Shulian praised mentally. Heaven's Eye Shang, what's wrong? The others wondered. Heaven's Eye reached out with one finger and wiped around the edge of a plate, then raised that finger high in the air. So much grease from just one wipe of a finger! He yelled in rage. These plates aren't clean! What kind of business are you guys running here? Shulian thought the man had noticed that something was off, but he hadn't imagined it was a different sort of off. He was rather surprised, but still the result was the same. The moment Heaven's Eye complained, the others began to gripe as well. My gosh, it's true! What is this? It's all sticky like spit! Wait, there's hair in this dish! Someone reached out with their chopsticks and stirred out a few strands of long, black hair. Holy shit! What's going on with your kitchen? Who the hell's working in the back? The smiling attendants nervously rubbed their hands together. We recently butchered a few pigs, so those are probably pig hairs. But when the chopsticks plucked at those hairs to pull them from the dish, the hairs only seemed to grow longer and longer the more they pulled. What kind of pigs have hair like this? Is your boss lady washing her hair in the kitchen? Take all of this away and redo it. Yes, sir, the attendants hurriedly acquiesced. We'll redo everything right away. My lords, please drink water. Drink water. They shouldn't drink the water either, Shulian thought. There must be something in the cups as well. Just before the cups reached the mob's lips, and before the attendants could get away, Heaven's Eye called out again. Get back here! One of the attendants returned, smiling apologetically. Does my lord Dao Zhang need anything else? Let me ask you something. Have you seen a very strange woman lurking around, accompanied by a small child? Heaven's Eye asked. So he did inquire after all. Thank goodness I instructed them not to tell, Shulian thought. But as he was thinking this, the attendant responded without missing a beat. Oh, yes! Shulian was stunned. The mob was shocked, and they put down their water and hushed their voices. Where are they? The attendant also hushed his voice. Upstairs! The mob went on high alert, their gazes flickering upwards. Shulian swiftly blocked the hole Hua Chang had poked out with his finger. A moment later they heard the sound of a group of people creeping upstairs. Shulian skulked to the door, listening to the footsteps. It seemed that the attendant had led the mob to the second floor, and they were sneaking towards them. His left arm held Hua Chang, and he clutched his sword in his right. Royer stood next to them to serve as a shield. All weapons were at the ready, and Chilean was tense and wholly prepared to launch an attack. However, the footsteps passed by their room and continued down the long hallway. Puzzled, Chilean pressed again against the door and looked out through the crack. The mob had passed them by and surrounded the entrance to another room. There seemed to be someone in that suite. Faint light filtered through the paper windows and reflected the silhouette of a woman sitting at the table. He never would have imagined that the attendants would actually stick to their word and keep their present under wraps, but the attendant had been referring to another guest. It seemed there was another very strange woman accompanied by a small child who had come to this inn to lodge for the night. Heaven's Eye and his group shared a look. After miming a series of hand gestures to each other, the group prepared to kick the door down. Suddenly, the light inside the room was extinguished, and the silhouette disappeared. Following right after a series of hurried footsteps, thud, 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 a woman yanked the door open, cussing. "What are you stinking men doing lurking outside my door in the middle of the night? Your grandmama wants to take a bath, so what are y'all planning, huh?" The lady's figure was slender and sensual, and her face was unpainted. Although she had an air of a fighting cock, she was nonetheless wholly a woman. She clicked her tongue, rolled up her sleeves, and continued to curse. "And it's a bunch of monks and cultivators to boot. Aren't you all men of the cloth? What happened to all your chastity vows?" A few of the monks mumbled, "It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding." The woman raised her brows impossibly high, then lifted her hand as if ready to strike. "I don't care if it's a misunderstanding or a meeting. Now leave this grandmama, and I'll grant y'all a nice tub of bath water." Hey. Wait. "Leave now, or this grandmama will grant you all a nice tub of bathwater." Hey, Lady Benefactor, how can you be like this? Consider your virtue. Let's get out of here." While Chilean didn't recognize the woman's face, her voice and the air about her was extremely familiar. A moment later, he gasped in shock. "Lan Chang?" "That's right, it's her," Hua Chang confirmed. Seeing the crowd disperse, Lan Chang seemed to let out a sigh of relief. She glanced around, then hurried back to her room, shutting the door behind her. This is the prostitute that made fun of Chilean for not being able to get erect. That they took to heaven, and who had, like, the fetus spirit.
Yes.
Seeing the crowd disperse, Lan Chang seemed to let out a sigh of relief. She glanced around, then hurried back to her room, shutting the door behind her. She wasn't covered in heavy makeup for once, and showed the world a plain face. While there were quite a number of wrinkles around her eyes that made her age apparent, unexpectedly she was rather elegantly beautiful. Chilean almost didn't recognize her. If she had presented herself like this on the day at the Palace of Divine Might, Pei Ming's claim to innocence might not have been as convincing. During the first wave of tremors from Mount Tonglu's reopening, a significant number of ghosts and monsters used the chaos to escape imprisonment. Lan Chan and the fetus spirit were among them. If the very strange woman the attendant referred to as Lan Chang, then that meant the child was... "The fetus spirit must be with her," Chilean whispered to Hua Chang. "That creature is too dangerous. We can't let them run loose like this." But the inn where they were staying was already seedy, and on top of that there was that band of mortal religious masters in pursuit of Hua Chang. It wasn't going to be easy for Chilean and Hua Chang to capture Lan Chang under these circumstances. The crowd of monks and cultivators made it to the staircase, and the attendant asked, "How did it go? Was that not the person my lords were searching for?" "It was not," Heaven's Eye replied, then sighed heavily. "Let me ask you this, then. Have you seen a cultivator with a small child?" The attendant gave it some thought. "There's no child, but there is a cultivator who is here by himself." Hearing this, the mob grew spirited again. "Where is he?" they asked in hushed voices. The attendant replied in a hushed voice as well. "Over here." This time he pointed to a different room. The crowd exchanged glances once more, and yet again tiptoed after the attendant to where he indicated. While they were still a stone's throw away from the room's entrance, a sharp sound snapped through the air. A yellow talisman shot through the crack of the door, brushing past Heaven's Eye's cheek before nailing itself into the wall behind him. Stunned, the crowd went to take a look and found the talisman halfway embedded in the wall. The wood had been split, like the sheet of paper was made of iron. The group was deeply shaken. Several of the mob's members were about to charge into the room, but Heaven's Eye stopped them. "It's not him, but it's still someone formidable. Don't be rash and start something." Then he gestured politely with an arm tucked behind him and called out to the guest, "Sorry to have disturbed you, skilled master. This is simply a misunderstanding." The one inside the room declined to respond, as expected of a skilled master. As the crowd backed away, someone asked, "Dao Zhang, why did you say it's not him inside the room? Wasn't that scrap cultivator's hand just as powerful when he threw those hidden weapons?" Scrap cultivator. Shilian had to really think about it before he realized the hidden weapons they referenced were his incorruptible chastity pellets. Well, all right. "Of course it's not him," Heaven's Eye replied in a low voice. They both throw hidden weapons, but the one inside the room is slightly weaker in strength and skill than the scrap cultivator." He hadn't yet finished his sentence before another 7 or 8 yellow talismans came shooting from behind them, nailing into the nearby doors and walls like a volley of arrows. The crowd fled downstairs in terror, and at great speed without another word. Seeing that everyone had left, Shilian stealthily opened the door, tugging a yellow talisman from the wall, and returned to his room. Huacheng pinched the yellow talisman in 2 fingers, then lightly tossed it away after taking only a cursory glance. Heaven's Eye really isn't too bad. A layer of spiritual chi was plated on the yellow talisman's surface, which was why it was sharp as a knife and strong as iron when it shot out and nailed itself deeply into the wall. When Shilian hurled those meatballs, they flew forth with such terrifying might that it was like they were a barrage of iron pellets. But they were not enhanced by any sort of spiritual powers. It was by his own strength alone. After all, he had spent centuries without any spiritual powers, and he had long since gotten accustomed to depending on only himself and his own skill in all matters. The reliance on spiritual powers, that was how Heaven's Eye judged their difference in strength. Just how many different kinds of people are gathered here? Shilian couldn't help but wonder. Why is there even a cultivator like that lodging here? Could he also be here to exorcise evil? It's understandable that those mortal monks and cultivators didn't notice anything, but it would be impossible for someone with his skill level not to sense anything weird about this place. Either way, now I absolutely can't let that mob discover Sanlong is here. If they raise their voices and that cultivator overhears, we might gain another pursuer, and he might not be as easy to deal with as the rest of them. The mob went back downstairs and returned to the lobby, sitting back down at the long table. Shilian peeked through the hole Huacheng had created. I'll have to go to the kitchens to redo your orders right away," the attendant said. "Please wait just a bit longer, my lords. Hee hee." "Wait, take the waters away too. Wash your cups properly before serving us." Of course, hee hee." The attendant left with a face full of smiles. He was probably headed for the kitchen. When they were still outside, Shilian had noticed that the kitchen was located behind the building, so he picked up Huacheng and flipped out the window and landed outside the inn. As he circled the back, he grabbed a few small pebbles and clutched them in his hand in case he needed to use them later. He skulked to a spot outside the kitchen. Huacheng poked again, and a small hole silently materialized, as if the wall were made of tofu. Shilian pressed close, peering inside to see just what kind of person ran this shady establishment. Let me drink. Who could it be? Place your bets. The light from the kitchen was dim. Only a few dying lamps were lit, and there was no one in sight. But if he listened carefully, he could hear the sound of crunching coming from one corner. Shilian changed his viewing angle a few times, until he finally discovered that the sound was coming from below the stove. His vision was blocked by the stove itself, but there was a human leg flung atop the brick stovetop. Its owner was obviously already dead, but the limb was still twitching in time to the sounds of someone munching and savoring their meal. Several attendants entered the kitchen. "My king!" A disheveled, grimy man abruptly raised his head from behind the stovetops. "What?" he replied blearily, his voice muffled by what he was chewing. The man's lips were covered with fresh blood, and his eyes gleamed with a greedy glow. A human hand dangled from his mouth as if it were a chicken foot. His expression and appearance were as horrifying as his identity was obvious. It was the man Chi Rong was currently possessing.
Why is he everywhere?
He's so silly. He slurped the hand's uneaten fingers into his stuffed cheeks. A moment later, he spat out a few bones right at the attendants' faces. "You useless trash! Born from a pile of shit," he cussed. "Coming in here to cry like you're at a funeral? And here I thought you were bringing this ancestor food. Well, where are the humans? Where's the meat? Didn't I already give you that poison? Why are they still standing?" The person lying dead on the ground, and currently being munched on, was likely either the original owner of this establishment or some other traveler who had passed by. The attendants were aggrieved. "My king, it's not that we're useless. Those monks and cultivators are all picky sons of bitches. They're making everything difficult. First they complained that the plates were too greasy, then they complained that there was hair in the dishes. They refused to eat anything we're serving." Chirong chewed, crunched, and then sucked on the remains of the blood from those 10 fingers. "What? What the fuck? This ancestor will personally cook them an execution meal. They should already be crying tears of joy for not being forced to kneel and lick their food off the ground. Who gave those fuckfaces the right to complain about anything? They should try eating what Cousin Crown Prince makes. That shit's the worse than shit. Those fuckers should know to grovel before this ancestor in gratitude." Julien was speechless. "Guga, don't pay any mind to what such useless trash says," Huachong comforted. "Yeah." Chirong leapt to his feet and erupted into a string of curses as he beat the attendants. "It's 'cause you're all useless trash. Can't even wash a plate right." His anger satisfied, Chirong rolled up his sleeves and wiped his blood-covered lips clean with one hand. Cursing and griping all the while, he took up a spatula and immediately beat it against an iron wok, producing a noisy riot of clinking and clanking. "One more time! Open your shitty eyes! I'll let you witness this ancestor's skills. We'll see if any of you have any more crap to say after this." Flames roared to the skies, and he swiftly remade a full spread of dishes and ordered the attendants to carry them out. And what a spread indeed! The meat was abundant, and the vegetables fresh. The dishes were aromatic and alluring. Julien returned to their guest room on the second floor and peeked below. The monks and cultivators were in awe. "This looks good." "Yeah, this is so well done. Especially these salt and pepper chicken feet. So fat and tender. Though perhaps a little too fat and tender. I've never seen chicken feet with such long digits." "Oh, this is our house specialty. They're not your typical chicken feet. They're the finest specialty selected feet sourced exclusively from the rare white phoenix chicken," the attendant explained. "With their claws removed, don't they look tempting? Just like the soft, delicate hands of a young woman?" "You're right, but I'm most excited for this fried pigskin. It looks lightly crispy and tender, and the fire was controlled just right. Wait, why does the pork have tattoos?" "Oh, it's because our chef wanted to demonstrate his godly carving skills," the attendants explained. "He intentionally etched that on to show off a bit, that's all." "The sweet and sour ribs don't seem cooked through, and the sauce is too thick. You're not trying to cover up anything funny with the flavor, are you?" "Oh, nothing of the sort," the attendant explained. "Everything in this establishment is butchered on the day of and sold fresh. It's just that our chef has a taste for stronger flavors, that's all." Seeing how they were endlessly praising the dishes and were ready to dig in, Julien really couldn't continue to stand by. He flung one of the pebbles he picked up earlier out of the small hole. His shot hit the hand Heaven's Eye was using to raise his cup, which was filled with water for his continued pursuit of detoxing. His arm shuddered, causing water to spill from the cup and splash right into a smiling attendant's face. While the liquid wasn't hot, it was like he'd poured boiling water on the attendant. The attendant covered his face, wailing, "Ah!" Everyone at the table brandished their weapons in shock. "What's going on?" Heaven's Eye seized the attendant's hand and yanked it aside. The crowd gasped. The attendant's facial features were half melted, as if water had spilled onto a sheet of paper and blotted the ink. Blurry, hazy trails of ink spread along his cheeks and rolled down. The attendant's facial features and ever-present smile had been drawn on with a brush. Without missing a beat, the mob flipped the table and started a brawl. The attendants hugged their heads in defense as they were beaten. "My lords, please stop," they howled. That very strange woman with the small child you're looking for. That strange cultivator, he's upstairs. They're right upstairs. Go find them. Let us go. We're only part-timers." "Bah, part-timers, who are you kidding? Trying to deceive us? Think that we're easy to fool? It's too late now." "We're not lying. It's true," the attendants cried miserably. The brawl downstairs was getting wild, and seeing that the masters had an overwhelming upper hand, Julien shook his head and left them to it. He was about to make his move to capture Lan Chang and the fetus spirit amidst this chaos, but before he could even open the door to his guest room, an unexpected shriek came from the hallway. The terrified voice of Lan Chang rang out. No, I beg you. I don't want to go. Please, I beg you, let us go. I'll kneel in Koto. Who cares about your prostrating? Said the angry voice of a young man. If you leave, then what can my general do? Fuck, you two really did him in this time. Enough useless talk, you're coming with me. Upon hearing that voice, Shilian flung open the door. It's you? A black-clad youth stood in the long hallway, blocking Lan Chang's path, his expression dark. He looked up the moment Shilian emerged, clearly flabbergasted. It's you? Shilian walked outside his room. Fu Yao, why are you here? Lan Chang saw him and widened her eyes. The Crown Prince? Fu Yao looked him up and down. His lips twitched, but at least his eyes didn't roll. Why are you here? Shilian glanced down at himself, then hurriedly stripped off the woman's clothing he was wearing. It's a long story. Just then Fu Yao noticed Hua Cheng standing by Shilian's side, and his pupils shrank. You? He cried in spite of himself. Hua Cheng sneered and ignored him. As for Lan Chang, she turned to bolt the moment she saw him. Fu Yao noticed and whirled around. Stop right there! He hadn't taken a single step before a long white silk band shot out and wrapped around her ankle. Lan Chang tumbled to the ground, but she immediately flipped onto her back, hugging her belly. It would seem that the fetus spirit was hidden in her stomach again. If you wanted her to stop, you should have done this. Just shouting about it is pointless, Shilian said as he reeled Royer in. By the way, you were talking about your general earlier. What happened to him? Fu Yao did...
Stop. Stop.
What's he doing? He's crazy.
He's fucking kneading on my chair, and then he just scratched me.
Pop quiz, who is Fu
Stop.
Yao's general?
Ow!
Bro, he's attacking you.
Oh, it hurts. What?
Do you remember who Fu Yao's general is?
It's either...
It's
either
Mooching. It's Mooching.
Mooching or... Okay.
He acts just like Mooching.
Yes.
Fu Yao didn't respond. He simply humphed and stormed over to seize Lan Chang's arm. He seemed truly furious. Not only did he forcibly grab a woman with a hard, unforgiving hand, but he had even uttered a profanity earlier. This was not at all the Fu Yao they knew. Unexpectedly, before he managed to pull Lan Chang up, her belly swelled up like a balloon. A white figure shot out and lunged at Fu Yao's face, shrieking. It was the fetus spirit. Every time it returned to its mother's womb, it recovered enough energy for another round of mayhem. Thus, its strike was ferocious and treacherous, and Fu Yao had to focus to beat it back. With a swift smack of his hand, the fetus spirit was slapped away like a ball. It hit a nearby wall with a bang, then ricocheted off and shot towards Shilian. Catch it! Don't let it run away! Fu Yao shouted. Before Shilian had even moved, Hua Cheng was already there in front of him to act as a shield. The fetus ball abruptly halted in front of him, then changed trajectory to charge at Fu Yao once again. As the ghost ball ricocheted and rampaged about the upstairs corridor, complete chaos also reigned down below. From the first floor, they could hear the cries of attendants begging for mercy. My lord cultivators, please be magnanimous. We lowly ones were only doing this for a bite to eat. Yeah, we won't do it again. Truth be told, normally we only steal chickens at most to eat. We only did this because that green lord forced us to be his underlings. He's in the kitchen right now. Seeing that the situation had fallen into complete chaos, Shilian suddenly remembered something and leapt out the second-floor window. Qirong sat in the kitchen with his legs crossed, picking at his teeth as he cheerfully waited for his meal to serve itself. A loud rumbling sound shook the room. Then someone kicked down the wall and leapt into the kitchen. Qirong! Where's Gaza? This classic martial god entrance shocked Qirong to his feet. You? Why are you here? Can't you knock like a normal person? Without missing a beat, Shilian went over and smacked Qirong's head into the chopping board, then pinned him down hard like he was a duck to be butchered. Cut the nonsense! What did you do to the child? Qirong grinned, a smile full of teeth. Look, isn't he right here, all over the ground? What was the ground littered with? Human bones! Fury blazed in Chilean, and he squeezed harder. Chirong started wailing and howling. Ow, 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 my arm! My arm is broken! 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 Cousin Crown Prince, wait! Okay, I'll be honest. I lied. I didn't eat him. I didn't. I was gonna, but I haven't yet. Where is he now? Chilean demanded. Stop crushing me! Stop crushing! I'll tell you! The excess baggage is locked up in the firewood shed, right there. Just take a look and you'll see. Chilean ordered Royer to bind Chirong. Then he opened a small door on the side of the kitchen. Sure enough, Guzzo was curled up inside. Chilean reached out under his nose to check his breathing. It was steady, and his little face was red and flushed. He looked like he was sound asleep. However, when Chilean lifted the boy, he could feel the small child was feverishly hot to the touch. Oh no, Chilean thought. By that point, the monks and cultivators had poured into the kitchen as well. The moment they entered, they nearly tripped on the piles of human bones on the floor. It was a shocking sight, and they cried out in alarm. Huh? What a shady establishment! So all these dishes, they were all made of human flesh? I told you that I'd never seen chicken feet that long. There was another loud rumbling noise, and a new hole was punched through the ceiling. A white ball came crashing down. What's that? The mob cried. Soon after, Fu Yao jumped down through the hole as well, hurling out over a dozen yellow talismans with one swing of his hand. Get lost! Don't get in the way of my work, he yelled. Ah, it's the skilled master, the mob cried. Longchang dragged herself over and rolled down through the hole too. Stop hitting him! What? A woman? The mob cried again. Yellow talismans shot everywhere like iron needles flying like blades. While Chilean dodged by just slightly shifting his body, Chirong couldn't get away, and all the talismans thudded squarely into his back. Ghost murder! He wailed pathetically. The mob swarmed over and gathered around him to examine the talismans, gasping in awe. Wow, what incredible aim! The once perfectly serviceable kitchen was suddenly horribly crowded, cramped, and clamorous. Fu Yao was chasing the leaping and dodging fetus spirit, and Lanchang was chasing Fu Yao as if she'd gone mad. Half of Chirong's face had been crushed out of shape by Chilean pressing him to the chopping board, and his back had turned into a target for the talismans Fu Yao had hurled while the crowd watched. Lanchang would even occasionally step on Chirong in the heat of her chase. Why? Why are there so many people? Chirong lamented. Who are you? And who are you? Is no one going to tell me to... Is no one gonna let me fucking eat? Why is it always like this no matter where I go? What do you all have against me? As he wailed, his eyes spun, and he saw through the collapsed wall of the kitchen to the yard outside. Hua Chang was out there, looking like he hadn't noticed the mayhem inside, and he sat calmly under a tree, relaxed and idle enough that he'd built a gold foil palace. Who knew how long he'd been playing around, bored out of his mind? He had already constructed a sumptuous little mansion from over a dozen sheets of gold foil. Chirong instantly changed his tune. Everyone, look outside! Crimson Rain-sought Flower turned into a ghost brat, he yelled at the top of his lungs. If you hold a grudge against him, go now. Don't miss this chance. If you pass this up, you won't get another shot. Before he could finish, a cold, glistening, bloody butcher knife was thrust between his teeth. Chilean's hand was gripping the knife's handle. Chilean smiled. What are you yelling about? Chirong did not see how Chilean had managed to thrust the knife into his mouth so swiftly, and he had only felt a sudden chill on his lips before realizing there was a new and extremely sharp object present on the tip of his tongue. Although he was unharmed as of yet, blood would flood his mouth if he tried moving the slightest bit. His voice died in his throat. However, the crowd had already seen Hua Chang stacking the gold foil palace in the yard outside the inn. Is that him? Probably. With Guzza in one arm and pulling Royer with the other, Chilean dashed outside to get there before the rest of them. Chirong was still bound by Royer, and he shrieked as he was dragged along the ground. Dog-fucked Chilean! You must be doing this on purpose! I've never seen anyone as evil as you. You fake White Lotus... Ah! The mob gathered around. Do we charge? Watch out for traps. How about we observe first? In the meantime, Hua Chang had finished building the little gold palace and had risen to his feet. He arched an eyebrow, and he looked condescendingly down at the building he'd constructed. Then he gave a gentle kick. Flop, flop, flop. The gold palace collapsed. And the inn crumbled as well, rumbling as it did. The spell was broken. Chilean turned back and looked. Behind him was no inn, but rather a collapsed little cottage, the type of building that was a normal sight in barren hills like these. The inn was only an illusion. The crowd of monks and cultivators hadn't yet decided whether to charge outside, so they were crushed by the collapsing roof and knocked unconscious by rotten logs and ragged straw. Shilian jogged to Hua Cheng's side. Sanlang, won't using your power like this affect you? Hua Cheng gave an effortless wave, and the gold foil disappeared into thin air. Don't worry, Guga. Something small like this is no bother. A piece of the broken roof moved, and Fu Yao's head poked out. He shoved a pile of hay away, exclaiming angrily, "You're not bothered, but I am!" Just moments before, he had finally captured the fetus spirit, but his vision suddenly went dark. When he looked up, the dilapidated roof was splitting and caving in, crumbling right on top of him. What a disaster! Fu Yao plucked a bunch of straw from his hair and stomped over to Shilian and Hua Cheng. He glared at Hua Cheng, who was shorter than him at present. You did this on purpose, he raged. Hua Cheng blinked. He neither rebuffed nor taunted him. He only raised his inky black eyes to look at Shilian. Shilian immediately grasped Hua Cheng's shoulder to push him behind his own body. No, surely not. Kids don't know how to control their strength. Sorry about that, Fu Yao. Fu Yao's hair was a frightful mess. He stared at Shilian in disbelief. Kids? Your Highness, do you really think I'm blind enough not to recognize who that is? What are you talking about? Shilian replied, sounding puzzled. This is just a very normal little boy. Fu Yao stared at Hua Cheng and narrowed his eyes. Behind them came faint creaking sounds. Long Cheng had also pushed away a chunk of roof and crawled out, and Fu Yao turned to walk over. Shilian sighed a breath of relief. He settled Geza on the ground, but a somewhat hesitant voice sounded by his ear as he was doing so. Your Highness? No, wait, Your Highness? Shilian straightened up at once. Function? It was indeed Function on the other end, and it sounded like he was sighing in relief. Thank goodness, you haven't changed your verbal password. Shilian gave a dry, soundless laugh. 800 years ago, when he activated his verbal password for the first time, it was just recite the Tao Te Ching 1,000 times. He'd never changed it, and even centuries later, and Function actually remembered what it was. Shilian recalled the way Function had laughed until he was hoarse when he first heard that verbal password all those years back, and he couldn't help but feel nostalgic, even though it was hardly the right time. Yes, it hasn't changed. How are things in the upper court? Has the Heavenly Emperor been informed of the matter with Ling Wen? Hua Cheng could tell that he was talking to an upper court official, and conscientiously stepped away, placing his hand on Geza's forehead to check for a fever. Function's voice grew serious. Things aren't good, and yes, he knows. The entire upper court is in chaos right now. Shilian sighed. Ling Wen has always handled coordination and management of upper court affairs, so there's no helping that. Can't any other civil gods take her place? They've tried, but they're not effective, Function said. Usually they're the first to score in the palace of Ling Wen. Like they could do the job 10 times better if they had the chance. But now that we actually need them to take up the task, not a single one can do even half of what she does. Just organizing news and information completely overwhelmed them. A number of civil gods have already dropped out and refused to help any further. Shilian shook his head. And it's not just Ling Wen, Function continued. Something happened with Mu Qing too. He was detained at first, but he attacked an injured official who was guarding him and escaped. What?
What the fuck?
On hearing this, Shilian jolted, then immediately looked at Fu Yao on impulse. The black-clad youth was saying something to Long Chang, and while there was displeasure on his face, the disquiet was more obvious. Shilian walked further away and hushed his voice. What happened to Mu Qing? How did it come to that? It isn't just that he was locked up. The entire palace of Xuanzhen has been suspended pending investigation, Function replied. It's all because of the fetus spirit. Shilian suppressed his voice further. What happened with the fetus spirit? Is he really involved in that case? Yes, Function said. Mu Qing was responsible for apprehending the female ghost Lan Chang and that fetus spirit, as they were among the nefarious creatures that escaped. But he didn't manage to capture them, and he let them get away. During the pursuit, the fetus spirit recognized Mu Qing. It said Mu Qing was the one who carved it from its mother's womb and molded it into a little ghost. That's impossible, Shilian blurted. No way. Even though Mooching is someone who's, well, surely he had no reason to do something like that. Who knows, Fengshen said. But apparently there's an evil cultivation method to accelerate ascension, which involves the use of dead babies. Now many of us are suspicious of the legitimacy of his ascension, so they detained him, so that he could take their time in thoroughly investigating all his past actions. Who knew he couldn't keep cool, or that he'd bolt like this? Now everyone believes he's guilty and went on the run because of it. Wait, Shilian said. This really isn't right. If Mu Qing was the perpetrator, then why didn't the fetus spirit and Lan Chang recognize him in the Palace of Divine Might? Why did they only accuse him while trying to avoid capture? It's very obviously slander, is it not? By the time I found out, things had already gotten bad, so I'm not sure what really happened, Fengshen said. It seems Lan Chang and the fetus spirit didn't know the identity of the one who performed the evil ritual, but the fetus spirit had a random moment of clarity while it was being molded. In that instant, it broke free of the spellcaster's control and bit their arm. When the fetus spirit was fighting with Mooching, it happened to see that there was also a bite scar on his arm, and it was centuries old. Did the bite mark match the fetus spirit's teeth? Shilian asked. It was an exact match, Fengshen replied. And how did Mooching explain this? Shilian asked, brow furrowing in contemplation. He admitted that he'd seen the fetus spirit before, Fengshen said. But he doesn't admit to being the perpetrator. He says that he saved the fetus spirit out of benevolence, and it bit him in the process. He might as well not have tried to explain anything with a confession like that. That was quite true. As far as everyone else was concerned, Mu Qing would never do anything of the sort. He was hardly considered a type to help another out of kindness of his heart, protect and cherish children, or perform anonymous good deeds. Mu Qing had always been a loner. He'd never shown any kindness that wasn't strictly required of him, and he didn't have any intimate friends in the heavens. Now that something like this had happened, no one would believe him, even if he tried to argue, and naturally, there was no one to speak on his behalf. This was probably why he chose to run away and investigate the truth himself. In any case, things are still out of control up here, Your Highness, Fengshen said. Where are you right now? The Heavenly Emperor said the gathering of ghosts probably can't be stopped at this point. Hurry back to join the emergency assembly. I'm currently... Shilian started. Before he could continue, Fu Yao's cold voice sounded from behind him. Who are you talking to? And that's where it ends. So we got so many people coming back. Long ass chapter, I'm sorry.
Everyone relax.
Dude, we found Chi-Rong, we found Geza, we found the fetus spirit, we lost Heaven's Eye, we reconnected with Fengshen and Mooching, well, Fengshen and Fu Yao in the brain array. Or Fengshen in the brain array and then Fu Yao in person.
Yeah.
And then it's hinted that Fu Yao might be Mooching in disguise. So that's what we have. It's crazy.
Wow.
And Hua Chung's just chilling.
Yeah, he's just chilling.
Poor Geza is like sick. He's just been dragged around by Chi-Rong this whole fucking time. Who knows what he fucking dragged this kid into. Oh, look at Wicker. Look at his eyes. They were like glowing for a second. They're gone now.
Wesker, I don't know what's... Oh.
The creature. Like the Danil's commercial.
His shape is so funny. He doesn't like to lay in his little nest that much anymore. He'll sit right here at night, and I'm just like looking at him like...
He doesn't like his nest at night. Maybe it's stinky. Maybe you need to flip it upside down.
I can't, because upside down is like rubber padding, so it doesn't slide everywhere. Yeah.
Vacuum it a little and fluff it up again. Hi, buddy.
Do I have to do that for you? Do I have to make everything perfect for you?
To plump his pillows. He's just like his father. He's OCD.
Do I have to be so sweet and perfect for you, my sweet Weshgor? Huh? Sweet little baby.